Welcome to Side Effects, effect versus affect. It's hard to know the difference. At McGowan Brabender, our goal is to provoke you to think differently about employee benefits, your employees, and the status quo. That's why it's Side Effects with an A. Welcome back to episode 3 of our Member Journey podcast series. Today, I am once again joined by MB Director of Strategy and Innovation, Dave Holman. With over 30 years in the benefits industry, Dave thought he'd seen it all. The pandemic triggered the Great Resignation, and Dave anticipated a shift in the workforce. Employee benefits are in the forefront as employers struggle to recruit and retain employees. At MB, we pride ourselves on being a proactive insurance broker and knew we had to act now to prepare our clients for the challenges they would face. Without further delay, let's welcome Dave Holman to the show to share the results of this months-long survey, data collection, and analysis of what to expect for the future of employee benefits. Hello, everyone. Hello, Dave.
Hey,
Thank you so much for joining us here in today's Immersion Center. Switching it up from the studio in the control room.
Yep.
So glad to be in here. And we are finally ready to get back to the member journey discussion.
It's been a while since we last
It's been
talked,
since April.
but
yes.
a lot has happened since then.
Right. And we wanted to collect the data, analyze the data, and make sure we had some actual solutions for our listeners, right?
Yeah, we needed to confirm what our hypothesis was.
Right. So let's recap episodes 1 and 2. We'll give the Spark Notes version. In part 1 of this series, we talked about the world we live in and the problems that employees and employers are facing. And in episode 2, we discussed what millennials and Zoomers really want in their benefit package. So if you want to give a little longer, you want to give some color to those.
Yeah, so the first episode, we set up the problem. Why are we even having this discussion, and how has the world dramatically changed, and came to the realization that it's not a temporary problem. There are just so many moving parts, but they're all pointing in the direction that this is a long-term problem that we'll have to address and just adjust to.
Right.
Episode 2, what we wanted to do is actually talk a little bit about the benefits that were attractive to millennials and to Zoomers that were out there, because they're a very unique demographic, and what they want out of a benefit package is different than what we have historically looked at.
Right.
So what we then did in the data was we wanted to validate what the marketplace research was telling us. And in fact, I would say it was validated and then a little bit more.
Absolutely. Right. So thank you for that little recap there. So we're done talking about the problem. Now we're going to talk about the solutions, why we're doing what we're doing. So to kick things off, can you explain the process that McGowan Brabender underwent to begin this remapping process?
Yeah. So we, as I mentioned a minute ago, we had a hypothesis about what we thought the outcome of our research would be, where we thought things were going. But at the same time, we have often found that when you work too closely in the situation, you become a little bit biased in reading into the data, analyzing the data, drawing your own conclusions. So we went out and we hired an independent firm that has extensive background in both research and with member journey mapping.
Right.
And we brought them in, and they did both qualitative and quantitative analysis.
Okay.
And over the course of 3 months, they interviewed people one-on-one. They had small focus groups. We interviewed employees. We interviewed clients and employees at the companies that we serve, and did it in a number of different ways. But the research came back, and both the qualitative and the quantitative analysis really complemented each other. It verified and confirmed the direction we thought we were going in. There were a few wrinkles in there that we found were very interesting.
Right. So how many people would you say total did we survey? Thousands?
We sent the survey out to over 100,000 of our members of the groups that we had, and I believe they did 40 to 50 one-on-one interviews.
Wow.
So we had a very good cross mix.
So we have the data.
Collection. We have the data to support what we thought.
Okay, so can you elaborate a little bit on the characteristics that you guys were looking for by generation? Did it matter who we interviewed? Did you specifically break it down with Zoomers, Millennials, Gen X, and then Boomers?
It was really important that we had a good cross representation, and we did that, especially on the quantitative. That we had a good cross mix, and what we did found there was a great distribution among all generations, and so it was especially important that we probably had a little that we had a more diverse collection of millennials and Zoomers, simply because they are rapidly taking over
or dominating the workforce.
The workforce. And so it was very important that we understood exactly how they were wired and what they were looking for.
Okay, perfect. So that helps set me up for my next question. Before we share what we found, what did you think you would find? Did you have any guesses?
We thought that when you talk about the member journey, we really thought that it would be generational. We thought that we would have a minimum of probably 5 to 7 different journey maps out there, not just based off generations, but different nuances that were out there. And that was not at all what we found.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite takeaways. So
that's kind of like the cliffhanger when you're watching a show and they get ready to cut to a commercial.
Right. So can you share what these 2 journeys were? Well, first, what are the typical 5 to 7 journeys that you're even talking about?
Well, we thought we would have the demographic journeys. Then we thought perhaps it would be by industry, like a group where there's a union group, non-union group, white collar, blue collar, geographic disbursement, remote workers. Those were the different types of journeys that we thought we would have.
Okay.
In the end, we were actually, I would say I was pleasantly surprised, but a little bit shocked to find out there are simply 2 member journeys that we
Which
came
is
across.
crazy.
It really was. And no matter how we sliced and diced the data, we came back to 2 member journeys. And though that is the member journey of a high utilizer of healthcare and the journey of a low utilizer of healthcare.
It sounds so simple when you just break it down with 2.
It really does. And we thought maybe it was oversimplified, but like I said, when we looked at the different data sets, we just kept coming back to that. And so you would think high utilizer and low utilizer, well, why are you worried about a low utilizer? Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, your low utilizer today is your high utilizer tomorrow.
Right.
And they still have to select and engage their benefit program. And
Right.
so they just interact with the program a little differently and what their expectations are of the program.
Right. So if you can break it down further, exactly, the low utilizer is just someone that's less engaged, right?
It's a person that's enrolled in benefits, but maybe they for example, their health plan, they may only utilize it once or twice a year. They show up to open enrollment meetings, but they're not highly engaged because it really doesn't affect them. They're not participating in a lot of the extracurricular programs that are available because it's not a very important need to them.
Right.
High utilizers, on the other hand, are people that may have chronic conditions, people that are starting families. Maybe they got married and they're trying to decide which plan are they better on, their new spouses or
Right.
their own program. And then as they navigate through those chronic conditions, are they on maintenance drugs, preventive and diagnostic screenings? It's just a whole nother level of complexity and engagement that they need to have to navigate through the health plan.
So when we talk about the engagement aspect of it, what exactly are some examples of that? What part of this journey are people getting stuck? Or how is the difference between, oh no, now I'm panicked, I'm a low utilizer, but now I need to use it? So is there anxiety connected with this?
Yeah, there is a lot of anxiety, and there are certainly there are specific events that we found among high utilizers and low utilizers that are the same. But really, it's at the point of access, and we spend a lot of time at open enrollment talking about benefits, but it's not necessarily what the employees want to hear. They want to hear more about when I'm ready to use my plan, not really what the benefits are, because the benefits are what they are. And for the most part, it's like it's a turnkey operation. It's like when you go in and you buy Starbucks, you order your drink. It can be very different, but ultimately you're going to hand them your form of payment, and they take care of the rest. I don't want to overcomplicate things, but healthcare is essentially the same. When you walk into a doctor's office, you're not going to debate whether it's 70% coverage or 80% coverage. You're going to hand me your ID card. You're going to receive something in the mail later. What the members are saying is they want more help and assistance at the point of access when they need to start a new maintenance drug, when they receive an EOB and don't know if it's a bill or it's not a bill, when they get something from their doctor's office where it doesn't match up for them, when they're trying to decide, am I better off in this plan or that plan? So it's very situational. There are many stops along the member journey, but what they're looking for is assistance in that moment of how to navigate that situation.
Wow. And that's what we learned from the surveys.
Yeah, we did. And I mentioned before that whether you're a high utilizer or a low utilizer of healthcare, the stress is the same at that moment in time. So, and I think that comes a little bit later in our discussion.
Well, yes, I was just going to say, I have had the pleasure of sitting through a few of your presentations about this. And two key terms that we keep talking about are stressors and delighters. And I'd love for you to introduce this to the listeners and tell them why these two terms are so important.
Yeah, on from a member journey perspective, a product journey discussion, you'll hear the term stressors and delighters, which is not something you hear in healthcare a lot. I think the first time I brought it up internally, people looked at me like I had just...
There's no delight in healthcare.
Yeah. So the best way of looking at it is in every situation along your member journey, it creates a state of mind. And that state of mind either causes stress or it causes a sense of delight, hence the term stressors and delighters.
Right.
Delighters are few and far between. And it means that you have you walk away from an experience with a positive feeling, or it could even be a neutral feeling.
Right.
Like I ran into an issue, I was able to quickly take care of it, and I walked away from it and I was able to move on to something else. That can be a delighter. It can be an unexpected surprise that you didn't expect to get out of your benefit program. And those are examples like when we surveyed our population, actually what they found, key examples of delighters. When an employer contributes any amount of money to an HSA account, that's a delighters.
Okay.
They actually found that short-term disability plans are delighters because there's that expectation that if you're out of work for a period of time, there's not always that assumption that you're going to be compensated for that. So it creates delighters because usually if you're off of work for an extended period of time, something has happened that may not always be, you've got different things that you're concerned about. So knowing that your income is protected is very important to them. EAPs, especially over the last couple of years, everything that we've gone through with COVID and the economy and everything else, an EAP is a very important tool for them to utilize that's out there. So those are examples of delighters. Stressors, on the other hand, I could go on and on for them. You think about things that diminish the value of a plan. It helps you have a negative feeling walking away. You don't feel good about the situation. You don't appreciate the program. You feel it's a lesser benefit than you should have. You don't think it's fair. And what we found is whether or not you are a high utilizer of healthcare or low utilizer of healthcare, the top 4 stressors that employees and members go through. The first one is a carrier change. And, we think about here at McGowan Bray Bender, when we work with employers and we navigate with their HR and their executive C-suite staff with a carrier change, we know how much stress it creates for the employers. it creates even more anxiety with the employees and the members that are out there, because
I would agree with that.
there are so many logistics. Which plan do I pick? What happens with my maintenance drugs that I'm on? Am I going to have to switch doctors? I don't have an ID card. Does prescription copay plans work with it? If the change takes place mid-calendar year, how do deductibles work? Do claims come over?
The list goes on and on.
And enrollment, another stressor, enrollment in a high deductible plan for the first time.
Right.
It's stress because there's always that fear of the unknown. What happens when my account isn't funded to where it needs to be and I have a big expense? Something happens to a family member. How am I going to afford that?
Right.
So that's the second one. So we had a carrier change. We had the high deductible change.
Yep.
Prescription drug costs are a huge stressor because it's almost like a game.
It's a guessing game.
A game of chance. Like you get your prescription filled.
How much is it going to cost?
How much? What
Is
it
it free?
costs you this month is not necessarily what it's going to cost you next month.
Right.
And then, when it goes from something that's covered to something that's over the counter, or the big, something that's very confusing is when you go in to get a script filled and suddenly the pharmacist is suggesting that you don't run it through your plan. You run it through a Good RX or you run it through another discount program. And that creates a lot of stressors because the employee wants to know how that works in coordination with their plan, because
Right.
sometimes it will,
Yep.
sometimes it won't. And if it's something that's reoccurring, because then that doesn't help them meet their deductible, but yet they're paying more and more out of pocket.
Yep.
So prescription drug costs is a huge problem. And then,
That was number 3.
yeah, the other large stressor has to do with preventive and diagnostic care.
The confusion between the two.
Confusion of, and really the difference, because when ACA was enacted, they talked about preventive screenings being covered at 100%.
Right.
Okay. And a lot of our groups have health management strategies in place, which is so critically important to making sure that you find problems before they become super big problems.
And cost a
The
lot of
challenge
money.
you run into is you go in and let's say it's a colonoscopy and you expect to have that covered at 100%, $0 at a cost, but it gets miscoded or it gets upcoded or they find a polyp and suddenly it's not a preventive exam anymore. It's a diagnostic exam and suddenly that $0 copay is now $1,400, $1,800. So it can be a very stressful time. And, members kind of feel helpless. Like, how do I deal with this? How do I address it? Can I do anything? So those are the stressors that are out there. And so what we found when we went through the entire member journey and all the different stops on the member journeys, there are a whole heck of a lot more stressors than there
And
are
those are just the
delighters.
top 4 that you
Those are the top 4.
bucketed.
There were long lists
Yeah.
that we had, and there's a very long list of stressors, a relatively short list of delighters. And what we did find was that in the cases where there were delighters, employers are not doing everything they can to really play up or promote the delighters.
Right.
It's just an assumption. They're
Yeah.
focused on the stressors, but yet that really comes to hurt you when it comes time for recruiting and retention.
Absolutely. And if our listeners are like, well, what the heck are we going to do about it? Don't worry, we'll be sharing our solutions next episode.
Yes.
But this episode, we're still just focused on our findings. So I wanted to kind of change gears to the generations again, because this is just this was one of my I thought it was one of the coolest things we found from the surveys.
It really was.
So the expectations for the generations, what are some differences you found? I know when we break it up, it's the baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Zoomers, and you searched how they were shaped, what they're motivated by, how they communicate, how they view the world, and what their favorite benefits are. So if you want to kind of break those down a little bit, give your top findings.
Okay, yeah, the top findings, because we could spend an entire podcast
I know. We have a
on
whole
just generations.
PowerPoint. Yeah.
Which is it's amazing and it's very interesting. But for purposes of this discussion, we'll start with boomers.
Okay.
Boomers are actually the generation that you need to worry about least as an employer when it comes to benefits. And the reason being is they've been around the block. If
Yeah.
they have chronic conditions, they understand. They've already figured out how to manage them. They understand their benefit program. They're super highly engaged.
They are high utilizers.
Yes, they're the higher utilizers, and as a result, they're highly engaged. They're well educated. They know how to navigate it. They what's very important to that group is that they have their core benefits as they segue and move into retirement. So a good health plan, disability plan,
Yep.
401k is so critical to them.
Yep.
They're not necessarily going to do a lot of job hopping at that point.
Right.
But what's important is that they feel comfortable with the plans that they have.
Right.
And so I know that doesn't sound super exciting, but like I said, they're really your status quo type of generation. Gen Xers are a little bit different. They are more self-motivated. And when I say that, like they'll put their personal interests above the companies if they're not aligned.
Right.
So they will move on to different job opportunities if it provides a growth opportunity to them. It provides advancement to them, an opportunity to grow. And that's really important. 56% of all of your business startups that are out there are from Gen Xers.
Wow.
They're hard workers.
Yep.
They are team players that are out there. And flexible work arrangements have become very important to them, especially in light of COVID. Like work from home was not super high on their priority list pre-COVID.
Right.
Now it's up there, and flexibility is very important to them. So we dug a little bit deeper into this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and one reason that flexibility is so important to them is this generation is the first generation that is caring not just for younger people, they're caring for their parents.
The sandwich.
Because the older generations are living much longer.
Right.
And so suddenly adult care is a huge concern for them that's out there. The ability to work remote, control over their schedules, and flexibility is important to them. 401k with matching benefits is very important because retirement is not too far off
Right.
on the horizon. But work-life balance is very important.
And they
to them.
still fully believe in the work-life balance, that term. Whereas the millennials are kind of like, no, it's not. We don't really care about work-life balance anymore. Like that still is super important to Gen X.
Yeah. So moving on to millennials.
Okay.
Flexibility, 24/7 lifestyle.
That's why
is
I was
important.
gonna say that.
They don't look at their jobs. They don't look at their lives in terms of it's an 8 to 5 job. It's
Right.
like things happen 24/7, and the ability to self-manage, the ability to set their own schedule, unlimited PTO, work from home.
My favorite benefits.
It is critically important to them, and they will absolutely jump jobs in order to have that. When you look at this generation and you think about it's a fad, it's because of the economy, it's because of COVID, that is not the case.
Right.
And you've got to figure out millennials in your workforce because by 2025, they'll be 75% of your workforce that's out there. They're highly cause driven. So they believe in giving back. So I talk about delighters and stressors a moment ago, and I talked about employers don't necessarily do a great job of promoting all the delighters.
Right.
So when you're recruiting and when you're retaining and when you're playing up and reselling your organization, the community involvement, the volunteer opportunities, millennials place an equal value to that of other benefits that are out there because they believe so much in giving back to the community and the world that we live in.
Right.
So the ability to work remote, and not just remote from home, but work remote from
anywhere,
from across the country when they're traveling. And just the ability to be flexible in all aspects of their job is important. Feedback is important for millennials, and they tend to be a very collaborative group of people.
Okay.
So people always want to lump together the millennials and the Zoomers, and there are some nuances. They do share some of the same characteristics, but there are differences. Zoomers, when I think of Zoomers, I think of diversity, personalization, and individuality. They have grown up in a native technology world where everything is personalized, everything is customized. They can opt in or opt out. They don't like doing what the masses do.
Correct.
Work-life balance is very important to them, just like the millennials. And they like to be self-directed and independent. However, they like continual check-ins, mentorships, and career pathing. That is very important. And so again, when you're out there recruiting and retaining, what's very important for them to hear is that it's just not a job, that you're working with them as they advance through the organization and grow, that those opportunities exist, and that you're constantly checking in with that generation, because that's the generation that continually got feedback from their parents. Very hands-on.
The helicopter parent.
I was going to say more the bulldozer parents.
Oh, okay.
So they are used to that, and more so than any other generations, the parents continue to have a very strong influence in their lives, especially when it comes to benefits that are out there. So training programs are uber important to them. So professional training, not just we're going to come in and teach you your job. They want to know what that is. They want to know how long it is, what you're going to cover, what you're going to go through. EAPs are very important to them. And that's where you get into the non-traditional benefits, the tuition reimbursement, lifestyle spending accounts. They would rather, utilize some benefit dollars on going on adventure vacations or
Uber.
Uber Eats, gym memberships,
Netflix.
paying their cell phone bills. And they also are very cause driven. The difference between millennials and Zoomers is that millennials will do it out of the goodness of their heart, and it doesn't matter when. Millennials will. Zoomers like to do it on the clock and like to be compensated. And that's kind of
that's interesting.
the difference. And they are the fair generation. And this is an important note to understand. Everything needs to be, I don't want to say everything. That's that's an
generalization.
Exaggeration. But in general, fairness is important. Things need to be as equal as possible. So if they are not taking certain core benefits from you, for example, they're staying on their parents' plan until they're 26.
What are they going to get?
It's important that they have something that is of equal value to them.
Right.
And so that $500 healthcare plan buyout is not equal in their minds. And they want something that offers some flexibility and an immediate benefit payout, because benefits are not as important, the core benefits, to the Zoomers, because they're simply not utilizing them. They're not taking disability necessarily. They're not on your medical plan. They're not, they don't see the value in a lot of that. And 401k, in all honesty, financial security is important, but retirement is something that is so far off into the future. They're worried about paying off student loan debt.
Right.
They're worried about I don't say worried about, but they desire instant gratification, the payouts, the vacation, the living in the here and now.
The paycheck right then and there.
Yeah. So it's very different.
Right. And another finding that I liked whenever we talk about the difference between boomers and Zoomers, technology. And that was a fun finding, right?
Yeah, I think we talk about some of the biggest surprises that came from a result, and we went back because we thought maybe there was a mistake. Zoomers and boomers both love their paper.
Which is crazy
and
to me.
You would think that, especially, you can understand the boomers.
Yes.
But you look at the Zoomers and you think, oh, they're technology, they're app-based, they're
Grew up with it.
Yeah, they're native to technology. And so we went digging a little bit deeper, and what we found is the reason that they want paper for everything is not for them, it's for their parents. Because
want to bring them home and show mom and dad.
Everything that's benefit related is going home to mom and dad in many cases are making the benefit decisions and instructing the Zoomers what to enroll in, what not to enroll in, which plans. And so that's creating, that was an interesting observation because it allowed us to take a step back and figure out that there's a great opportunity that's out there we need to do a better job as a broker and as an employer and making them more independent and treating them differently than other generations, because we generally have that one size fits all approach. And we will do the same spiel for open enrollment that we do for a Gen Xer and a millennial as we do for the Zoomer.
Right.
And their knowledge level is much different, because what we did was we went digging a little deeper and we found out their knowledge of benefits is nil compared to other, because they've not needed to. In their defense, they've not needed to because they've had guidance the whole way.
Yep.
And so what we need to do is treat them differently. And we always say, almost like treat them like the 64-year-old that's getting ready to enroll in Medicare for the first time. You talk about that experience. You're taking something they know nothing about and getting them up to speed over 12 months so that when they enroll in Medicare, they know exactly the animal that they're dealing with.
Right. So as we get towards the end of this episode, I wanted to see, was there anything else? Oh, did we have a text message?
Our time is up, Kenzie. I've got to get no. I apologize.
Was one of your Zoomers texting you? So as we wrap up this podcast, I wanted to see if there was anything else. This is a passion project of yours. For many years, you wake up in a cold sweat with this.
It is. It's been exciting. This was something that we started down the path on back in 2019, and then we had a little global pandemic hit us. And so we had to pivot and do other things. But we've seen this coming, but I'm very passionate about it because the way that we engage our workforce and what's important to them is what's going to make the difference for recruiting and retention, which is what our employers are telling us today they're struggling with the most. I mean, for years and years, it was cost. How do you manage the cost? How do you predict the cost? It's still very important. But right now, they're more concerned with, how do we get the right, not just get, not the right employees, but in some cases, how do we get bodies so that we can run the shifts we need to, so we can stay open the days that we need to and not cut back on things. So it's very important. And so there is a psyche to all of this, and we understand how they're wired and what's important. We can absolutely transform our employers' lives.
I think that's a mic drop right there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us on episode 3. And next episode, we will be sharing the solutions.
Yes.
So we're very excited about that. Buckle up, bring your pen and pencil and paper, and we will be sharing that. So if you have any questions or comments about the member journey, part 3 with our data, you can email me at kenzie@healthierbirthdays.com or
Dave@healthierbirthdays.com.
Right.
And if you would like a copy of the research study and what we found, the executive summary and the data, email us and we will send you.
We can share. We want to share.
Yeah, we'll share it.
Yep. So thanks for joining us on Side Effects, and we'll see you next time.